In today's video, Magnus will be stunning his new rival Alireza Firouzja on move 5 with the move 5g5 in the Alekhine's opening. That move was just unthinkable, and the rest of the game from there is just unbelievable. And by the way, this game did take place on the chess.com servers on June 9th, 2024, and let's dive right in. And here we go. In the game, Alireza opens 1e4, best by test, and now Magnus does go 1 knight f6, the Alekhine's opening. The audacity of this man, I mean no one, and I mean no one, plays the Alekhine's opening at the highest level unless your name is literally Magnus Carlsen. I mean, who does this guy think he is? Magnus Carlsen. All right, here, Alireza, he attacks the knight on f6. e5 is the move, advancing the pawn. Now, knight d5, then d4. Pawn number 2 enters the game. What will Magnus do? He goes d6, putting pressure on that pawn on e5. Now we have c4 for Alireza. Pawn number 3 enters the game, putting pressure on that knight on d5. Then knight b6 retreats the knight. And finally, pawn number 4 enters the game with the move 4f4. And finally, we have that famous 4 pawns attack center here. Those 4 pawns make a very strong impression. And here, white is thought to have a very large advantage. So, what the heck is Magnus doing? Why would he give white a huge advantage right out of the opening with these 4 incredibly strong pawns in the center? Well, it turns out for this game, Magnus had a very special idea in mind. And in this position on move 5, Magnus plays the unthinkable move as black. He goes 5g5, expanding on the king side. My goodness, what is black doing here? It's very simple. It's a deflection pawn sacrifice. If white takes on g5, f takes g5, then black takes on e5, and then trades queens, and black would have an excellent position. For example, f takes g5, d takes d takes, and then queen takes d1 would be excellent for the second player. So with that in mind here, on move 6, Alireza has to find something else to fight for an advantage. Now, what are his options? The strongest move here, believe it or not, is just knight to c3. The point being, if black does take on f4, you recapture with the bishop and your development is humming along fantastic. Instead, in this position, Alireza, he plays a much more aggressive looking move, the Hikaru move, queen to h5. Now, I call this the Hikaru move because Hikaru Nakamura popularized the idea of going e4, e5, then queen to h5 right out of the opening. So the Hikaru queen advance here played by Alireza. Now, what will black do about it? Well, he's got a lot of different options. The strongest of which is just bishop f5, intending maybe bishop g6, and the bishop would be very, very strong on this diagonal. Instead, in the game, d takes e5, chosen by the goat, and now here, instead of taking on e5, that would be a massive blunder. Instead, Alireza does go knight to f3, and this move is very strong and very, very important. Now, real fast, why should white not go f takes e5 here? It's very simple. If you do that, you lose the pawn on d4 to queen takes d4, and then black would be doing excellent. So instead, you have to go knight f3 as Alireza did in the game. The point being, the knight controls e5, d4, and it also threatens knight takes g5. And if that knight gets to the g5 square, then you are threatening queen takes f7. That would be just deadly. Therefore here, Magnus, he will have to respond immediately. And what is he going to do in the game? Again, if you take on d4 or f4, knight g5 is deadly. Therefore, instead, in the game, the goat does go bishop f5, and this move is very, very important. If you go, say, knight takes g5, black will have the option of going bishop g6, and again, f7 will be defended. Therefore, instead, in the game, queen takes g5, chosen by the first player, and this move is very strong. You win the pawn, you threaten the bishop, and overall, the attack does continue. Now here, how should black proceed? Well, he has a couple of different options. The first one, you can go e6, defending the bishop on f5. Now, the problem with that move is white can trade queens. Queen takes d8 would be a decent move. For example, if e6, then queen takes d8, then king takes, and here, after f takes e5, white would have a very large advantage in the endgame. He is up a single pawn. He has the strong pawn center on e5, d4, and c4, and overall, white is doing excellent. Now, Instead of that, in the game, Magnus went for a completely different idea. He goes bishop takes b1, giving up his bishop with tempo, simply winning that knight on b1, forcing rook takes b1, and now here he has many different options. For example, e takes d4 is quite strong here, but instead he plays a very strange move, e4, gaining space in the center. But the problem with this move, white can simply go knight to e5, and that knight will be incredibly strong on the e5 square. Now, fortunately for Magnus in this position, he did not go knight e5. Instead, queen to e5 chosen by Alireza. And look at this move. You slide the queen over, threaten the rook, and give up the knight on f3. I mean, the tactics here are just out of control. And Magnus, he sits down and calculates everything out, and he finds the strongest move here. And by the way, if you like puzzles, go ahead and pause the video right now and try to figure out what Magnus should be doing as black right here in this position. And while you're at it, go and smash that YouTube like button for more videos just like this. Thank you so much for doing that. All right, here, of course, you do not defend the rook on g8. If you go, say, rook g8, you give up the option of castling kingside forever. That would be way too slow, way too weak. Instead, you take the knight on f3. E takes f3, chosen in the game. Now queen takes h8 is forced. There is nothing else. And here, Alireza, he is up the exchange. He has the extra rook versus the extra knight of Magnus. But here, of course, Magnus will have different ideas to counterattack. Now, of course, the pawn on d4 is defended by the queen on h8. Therefore, queen takes d4 is not a possibility yet. But instead here, he goes queen d6. And what is the idea of queen d6? Well, we are about to find out. I don't want to spoil it for you, so just stay tuned. Wait for the key follow-up move by Magnus. All right, now here, turns out Alireza has got to find the right way to continue. His king on e1 is incredibly vulnerable, and overall, despite being up material, his entire position is pretty much teetering on the brink of collapse. So, what are his options? Well, first of all, you can go c5, trying to fork the knight and the queen. However, there is a big tactical flaw with that move I'm going to show you in just a second. Beyond that, you can take the pawn on h7. That is likely the strongest move here. And you can also take on f3 with the g-pawn. G takes f3. That is also very playable. Now, unfortunately for Alireza, in this position, he plays the move c5, and this move looks so obvious. I mean, what could be more obvious than forking both the queen on d6 and the knight on b6? Well, the problem, this move has a very simple flaw. Here, Magnus, the GOAT, he goes queen g6, sliding the queen over and pressuring the rook on b2, but beyond that, he's pressuring the pawn on g2. For example, now, f takes g2 is being threatened, forking both the bishop and the rook on h1. What the heck is white going to do about it? Well, he finds literally the only move here. The only move is f5, a deflection pawn sacrifice. The point being, after f5, if you take the pawn, then the rook on b1 is still hanging. However, the pawn on g2 is not hanging, and that eliminates that forking threat. So, f5, queen takes f5, and now, of course, f takes g2 is not nearly as serious a threat as it was before. Now here, white really should think about going rook a1, getting the rook out of the attack of the queen, but Alireza, he's a very active player. He says, no way, Jose. He goes bishop b5, giving the king on e8 the check. What is the idea? Black just goes c6, blocking the check. Now white has the bishop on b5 and the rook on b1 under attack, as well as the pawn on g2. And what does Alireza do here? He ignores the bishop, he ignores the rook, and he just goes short castles, ignoring everything. Black here can literally take whatever he wants, the rook, the bishop, even the pawn on g2. Well, actually, the pawn on g2, you can't take that as the pawn is pinned to the queen on f5. So that was the idea. Here, Alireza, he's willing to give up material to speed up development and speed up the attack on the black king. But will it work out? I mean, it's going to be very dicey from here. All right, here, it turns out the strongest move for black is actually queen to g6, sliding back the king and ignoring both the bishop and the rook on b1 for now. However, Magnus in the game, he takes the rook on b1, queen takes b1, and this turns out to be a fatal mistake. Maybe not fatal, but certainly a massive mistake. And again, If you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to figure out why this move, queen takes b1 by the GOAT, Magnus Carlsen, was not a good move in this position. All right, the key idea here, I hope you found this one, is bishop to h6 with the attack on the bishop on f8 and also the attack with the rook on the queen. That means the bishop will be falling. You must move the queen, but as soon as you move the queen, queen takes f8 will win the bishop. All right, here, Magnus, queen takes b2, he wins a pawn, but then of course queen takes f8 comes, winning the bishop on the f8 square. All right, king d7 chosen by the GOAT, his king is running away, and now here, what will Alireza do? Well, it turns out the strongest move here is just rook takes f3, winning that free pawn and eliminating once and for all the threat of queen takes g2. By the way, here, black, he is literally threatening checkmate in one move, the audacity of the GOAT in this game. All right, here, again, rook takes f3 is the right way forward, but instead, rook f2 chosen in the game, and this move is quite a bit weaker. I mean, yes, it does deal with the threat of queen takes g2. That is no longer possible, but here, Magnus, he just takes the bishop on b5. Queen takes b5 chosen. Magnus winning yet another piece. I mean, look at this. In this position right here, Magnus, he has the extra minor piece and 2 extra pawns on the king side. He's literally up roughly 5 pawns according to my count. But here, Alireza, of course, he has a vicious attack. He doesn't even take the knight on b6. He goes queen takes f7. The point being, now the king is even more exposed, and the knight on b6 has very few good squares to go to. All right, here, Magnus, what does he do? He gives a check on b1. Queen b1 hits the king on the g1 square. Now, rook f1 blocks the attack and hits the queen on b1 in return. Now, where is the queen going to go? Well, it turns out it is going to g6. Here, the GOAT is offering the queen trade. Queen takes g6 is now a possibility, but Alireza says, no way, Jose. The queens are staying on the board. He knows if you trade queens right here, that is going to be a terrible endgame for white. Therefore, instead, queen takes f3 chosen. This move is weaker. It gives up the bishop on h6, but it keeps the queens on the board at all costs. And here, Magnus says, you know what? If you're going to give me yet another free piece, I will take it. Queen takes h6 chosen in the game. He wins the free bishop. All right, now c takes b6, finally winning back that knight on b6. And now finally, let's slow down and do inventory. You know what? One more move. A takes b6, winning back that pawn. And now let's slow down and do inventory. In this position, both sides have a little bit more than 1 minute left on the clock, but the big difference is black is literally up a knight and an extra pawn versus white. I mean, he's literally up a minor piece, but don't forget that king on d7 is very, very vulnerable, and this is a blitz game, meaning literally anything can happen. All right, now here, Alireza, rook e1, centralizing the rook, then queen d6, sliding over with the queen. Then we have queen g4, hitting the king on d7, giving it a little check. Now, e6 blocks the check. And now Alireza, rook f1, sliding the rook over to the open f file. The point being, you are threatening rook f7, hitting the king on d7. All right, now here, the best move for black is going to be king c7. The point being, you can go knight d7, blocking the check of the rook on the king. But instead, in the game, c5 chosen, advancing on the queen side. And this move turns out to be quite a bit weaker. All right, here, Alireza, he finds the key idea to just blow open the position. This one is just beautiful. And again, if you like puzzles, pause the video right now. Try to find the beautiful idea for white right here. Of course, the key idea is d5. What is the point of this move? You cannot take the pawn. If you take with the pawn, that is literally illegal, as the king would be under fire. And if you take with the queen, then the move rook d1 pins the queen to the king. That is game over. So the deflection pawn sacrifice, d5, opening up the d file. You can't take with the queen. You can't take with the pawn. And if you don't do anything, then d takes e6, followed by rook d1 is being threatened. All right, here in the game, king c7 chosen by Magnus, getting his king off that d file. But now rook to f7 flies up with the rook, hits the king on c7. Where is it going to go? It's not going anywhere. Instead, knight d7 blocks the attack. Now d takes e6, defends the rook in advance and hits the knight on d7. And keep in mind, that knight on d7 is now pinned by the rook on f7 to the king on c8. All right, now rook d8, defends with the rook, defends against the threat of simply rook takes d7. Now we have rook takes h7, the rook staying on the 7th rank, keeping the pin on the knight, and in the meantime, he gobbles up that pawn like a hungry hippo. All right, now b5, advancing on the queen side is the GOAT. He has 1, 2, 3 pawns on the queen side. He's got to get those pawns rolling down the board. Now e takes d7, a very simple move, finally winning that knight. But of course, in this position, rook takes d7 would have been a little bit stronger for the first player. Instead, e takes d7 chosen in the game, then c4, once again advancing those pawns down the board. Now here in this position, Alireza, he plays an unthinkable move. Here, he's got to keep the queens on the board. He must keep the attack going, but instead, he goes queen g3. What is the idea with this move? He's trying to get the queens off the board. Of course, now the queen on d6 is pinned to the king on c7 by the queen on g3. But the problem here is that you want to keep the queens on the board as white. If the queens come off, you're going to be losing as those pawns on the queen side are too far advanced. And here Magnus says, you know what? No problem. Queen takes g3. We are heading for the endgame. Now h takes, then rook takes d7. And look at this. Material is even. Both sides have 1, 2, 3 pawns and the rook and the king. However, the problem is these pawns on the queen side are too far advanced. Now we have rook h5 trying to attack the pawn on b5. But then king c6 defends. Now king f2, c3, king e3, and here, one last move decides the game. That is the move c2. And in this position, Alireza, he resigns on the spot to the GOAT, Magnus Carlsen. And the problem is there's no easy way to stop c1 promoting to a queen. If you go rook c5, you lose the rook. If you go rook h1, for example, rook h1, then the move is rook to d1. And if you go, say, king e2, trying to defend, then the move is rook takes h1 followed by c1. No matter what you do, you are losing material. Black gets the new queen, and therefore, for that reason, in this position after c2, Alireza resigns on the spot to the GOAT, Magnus Carlsen. Wow, what a game between the GOAT, Magnus Carlsen, and Alireza Firouzja in this crazy blitz game from June 9th, 2024. And especially, what an insane opening with the Alekhine's opening. Going for the 4 pawns attack is Alireza. And then finally, in this position, the key move g5, advancing on the king side. The weird deflection sacrifice where it all started. Then the Hikaru queen move, and so on and so forth. Wow, what an unbelievable game between the GOAT and Alireza. All right, Chess YouTube, hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, smash that like button and comment down below what you thought of this game. I mean, to me, this is one of the craziest games these two titans have ever played. So again, comment down below what you thought. And while you're at it, go and check out this video right here, where Magnus plays an unthinkable rook sacrifice in the French defense in the Whenever variation against Alireza once again. If you want to see an insane video, check that game out, and I'll see you in the next video.